Hi, my name is Martin Sellaus, and this presentation is about designing game story. It is important to mention that gameplay, it means challenges and activities, should be designed before the story. Gameplay is the main fun component for the game. Story provides some additional part of the fun. Story gives content for gameplay, progress in dramatic and emotional way. Gameplay should be integrated with the story elements. Many games doesn't have story at all. Some of the genres, like adventure games, are story-based. Story is important for casual players. Hardcore players ignore it. What is the difference between the story and the game? In this point, people have different views. Some say gameplay will destroy a good story. Others say story will destroy a gameplay. We say gameplay plus story equals good experience. The main difference is story is for communication, game is for action. But story is not passive. It makes you think and ask, what happens next? Most important similarity is related with general goals. Story and game have the same goal: create an experience. But yes, the difference is that story is based on desire to know, and games are based on the desire to act. So let players to act. Don't carry them through the game with narrative. Before we start with the story design, let's clarify a few concepts that are related with the interactive storytelling. Story is the series of events. Those events can be started by the player or by the game. In the interactive story, the player chooses or calls the events. They can be player events, like user actions, or they can be in-game events that are initiated by core mechanics, like responses to player actions. Player can cause them or avoid them. This is the interaction between the game and the player. Narratives are narrated events in the game that player can't control. They are non-interactive. They can't be changed by the player. Only thing that the player can do is to skip them. Dialogue is talking with non-player characters. This is different gameplay mode, where player is making selections between pre-written lines. At the same time, all other actions are not available. Narratives are story events that are narrated. Although narrative is not interactive and sometimes boring for the players, they are still used for several reasons. For example, introducing the situation for the player, or describing the mission, and so on. It can be done through different formats like movie, animation, scrolling text, voiceover, and so on. Narratives should be as short as possible and used as rarely as possible. So, how to support story writing? One good trick is to start from the end. Define what is the point for your story. Then list game challenges. Make sequence for your gameplay and story. What are the activities to reach to the end of your story? Then create a structure for your story. How the story is rolled out. How the story events are related to each other. In the book, story is revealed as reader reads. In the game, there are different triggers. For example, arriving to some area triggers a part of the story. or for example, time pass and an event is triggered. To describe the structure for the story, different models like dividing units, branches, phases can be used. Basically, there are different ways how to divide bigger story to smaller elements. You can use one of the models or combine them. To provide clear structure to your story, it can be divided into units. Story is divided to acts. Acts are divided to sequences. Sequences are divided to scenes that are equal to one place or one time. Scenes are divided to beats that are equal to actions. For example, here you can see the structure of classical Hollywood story, the three-act structure. The first act is hook. It is the beginning or the meeting of challenge. Second act is hold. It is the confrontation with challenge. And third act is payoff. For example, winning the big boss fight and getting the reward, and happy ending, of course. Those units can be delivered in an unlimited series, where the content of the levels is not related with each other. Then one series should have all three acts, hook, hold, and payoff. Or then they can be delivered in limited series, where the content of levels is related with each other. Then the hook act can be in the first series, the hold can be in the second one, and the payoff in the third one. The next question is, does the game has one or multiple story branches? In linear stories, the player can't change the story. It doesn't mean that the story is non-interactive. Players can be kept in the same scene with doing several actions, maybe even repeating them before she can go to the next scene. Linear story structure is good because it has less content, it is easier to implement, it creates less bugs, it generates stronger emotions among players. Branching story structure looks like a tree. It can have more than one starting point. It usually has more than one ending. This causes confusion among players. Is it correct ending? Branching stories are expensive. Each branch needs content and sub-stories. This is the reason why they are not widely used in commercial games. Branching stories force players to repeat the game. Players need to play the game several times to see the content of the other branch. Players usually don't like it. And fallback stories are compromise between linear and branching stories. Story branches and falls back to single ending. Player has illusion of control. This is industry standard. The third method how you can structure your story is based on story phases. This is the classical structure, how the story starts, how the tension grows, and how it finally calms down after the climax. Typical phases for the story are introduction, introducing the character or the context, complication, introducing the problem, body, series of smaller events and challenges, climax, solving the main problem, resolution, series of smaller challenges resolved, and finally point, where the moral of the story is revealed. But you can find many alternative models how to structure your story. For example, the journey of hero that has phases like the need, go, search, find, fight, take, return, and change. For example, here you can see the Time Mesh World War II linear story. Basically, it has 3 acts in 4 different parts. The first act is the hook or introduction with compilation, which contains understanding the situation and getting instructions. The third act is the hold or body, which contains the collecting the codebook and Enigma machine. And the final act is a payoff or climax with resolution that contains breaking the code. Dialogues are good for telling the story, but not only. They are also part of the interaction. The easiest method for creating dialogues is to use dialogue trees. The player contacts with non-player character. Non-player character is asking a question. Player has to choose between different answers. Non-player character has a different responses to every answer. Answers can be repeated, and dialogue branches can be related with conditions. For example, part of the dialogue is not presented when player has not collected certain information or items. For example, here you can see the dialogue between the player and barman from the Time Mesh World War II Paris scene. The entire dialogue has a condition. Player can't enter to the cafe if she has not spoken with the prisoner. Non-player character is asking, "Would you like to have something?" Player has 4 options to answer. Only one of them is helping to proceed in the game, but it is related with the condition. This branch of the dialogue is accessible only if the player has talked with soldiers. As you can see, non-player character responses for the second and third answer have repeatings. Another method for creating dialogues is to use a dialogue database. Dialogue options, lines for non-player characters and players, are stored in the database, and the options are presented as a list to the player. Options are added or deleted from this list based on player non-player character interaction. The dialogue database and story engine is more complex topic, and we don't go in details during this presentation. The content of this presentation is based on Ernst Adams' book Fundamentals of Game Design. The examples of this presentation are from the Time Mesh history game. This is the end of the story.